What does that mean? Zadok Allen, a captain of the Army Corps of Savants, pointed at a hand-painted sign over the entrance to the dome. It read, "No smoking." You can't smoke in there. I can read, Olmsted. I mean, why not? Don't tell me you're making explosives in this facility. No, nothing like that, old man. The Cosmorama contains precision optical equipment. Even particles of tobacco smoke can have a detrimental effect on the works. You'll see what I mean when we go inside. To Zadok, the Cosmorama looked like a dome turned inside out, steel struts and beams wrapped around a hemispherical shell of steel panels. A tube protruded from the top of the dome. That must be the telescope. He could only assume that he would find himself in an egg-like chamber. He was partially correct. Zadok's occasional companion and his nominal superior, Captain Robert Olmsted, led the two men into a hot, well-lit space. Olmsted paused and slowly moved his arm around to invite Zadok to take in the sights. "Welcome to my little kingdom." Zadok sniffed. An unpleasant, garlicky aroma permeated the air, but there was a soothing quality to the light. It does look like the inside of an eggshell, except for the esoteric contraption at its very heart. It was a hideous amalgam of a telescope, hand crank, tractor seats, gears, lenses, prisms, and at its heart a limelight. That explains the smell, at least. The heat, too. Everything else about the machine remained a mystery to the visitor. Allen noted that there were two private soldiers seated at the Cosmorama itself. One of them, a middle-aged black man, was looking into the telescope eyepiece. The other man had the arms of a blacksmith. He was busily spinning a pair of hand cranks according to instructions given by the man at the eyepiece. "And here," Olmsted pointed at the giant soldier at the hand wheels, "is... Ah, I see now, Olmsted. That is just like the controls of an artillery piece. One can direct the telescope that way." Zadok had always been a blurter. It was why he was still only a captain. That and another thing. "You have it in one, Allen. Very good. The Cosmorama was built to view the galaxy's farthest reaches, but today we are putting it to a more earthly pursuit. Let me show you." Olmsted pointed at the telescope operator. Private Obed Marsh here has been with the Cosmorama project for almost a year. He is our best operator. Obed, would you be so kind as to activate the projector? The private did as he was told. He twisted a dial, unscrewed a lens cap, and pulled a lever. A panel opened, and with a clunk, the image from the telescope was projected onto the side of the dome. Blue sky and wispy clouds covered the far side of the dome. "That's all very impressive. It's a clever device you have here, but why am I here?" Obed interrupted before Olmsted could explain. He pointed at something on the far wall. "There it is, Captain." "What am I supposed to be looking at, Olmsted?" Olmsted barked at the soldier. "Increase magnification, if you please." The giant soldier fiddled with a dial. Instantly the image projected onto the wall jumped, and what Zadok had perceived to be just a dot exploded into a fully formed image. It was a giant balloon, very large. Zadok had to admit, larger than anything Americans could put into the air. Cleverly applied blue and white paint disguised the gas bag and caused the craft to blend into the sky. Beneath the Brobdingnagian balloon, there was suspended a metal tube, presumably the crew compartment, although to Zadok's eyes it looked like it would be a tight fit even for one person. Around the tube, at random places, were bulbous glass protrusions. A slowly turning propeller at one end of the tube kept the balloon stationary. Two vaguely bat-like wings at the other end of the tube could only have been steering devices. Olmsted was obviously disquieted by the craft. "What do you make of those wings?" Zadok only shrugged. "I'll tell you, Alan, it reminds me of some prehistoric monster. What really galls me is that there is nothing, not a damn thing we can do about our uninvited intruder." "Are those windows camera apertures?" Zadok inquired. "Yes, we believe that they are. Whoever controls that craft, and we think it is from the Rhenish Workers' Republic, is up there taking pictures of us as we speak." "So what you're saying, Olmsted, is that thing up there is taking pictures of..." Olmsted shifted his eyes to the enlisted men and then glared at Zadok, as if to remind the other captain of exactly where they were and why they were there. Zadok, who'd been adequately chastened, paused to rephrase. "Making pictures of the project." Yes, old man, there is no reason to think that is not the case, and damn me for sounding like a broken gramophone, there is nothing we can do about it. That brought a small smile to Captain Zadok's face. I wouldn't say that, Olmsted. Quite the contrary, in fact. The interior of a stratospherian ship is not intended to be comfortable. The air is thin and cold, but the pilot was not bothered. After all, it is an honor to be chosen to pilot a spy ship. Charlotta was an accomplished pilot, but even she knew there was an element of luck in her being given such a plum assignment. Frauenflieger Charlotte von Junst knew precisely the form her luck took. She was small. Only a very petite woman could have any chance of navigating around the jumble of air tanks, cameras, and a dozen other devices that filled the tubular fuselage of a stratosphere ship. Charlotta finished removing the photographic plates from the high-altitude camera. She was a conscientious spy, and she didn't look too closely at what she was spying on. It just looks like an extensive excavation, she thought. But there must be more to it. The geometry of the hole doesn't look right. In any event, the contents of the photographic plates were not her concern. Charlotta would soon travel back to the coast, unhook the spy craft from the giant gas bag, and glide down to the surface. There she would deliver them to a waiting French submersible, and then she and the plates would return to Europe. Before setting course for the coast, Charlotta broke out the binoculars to scan the surface one more time. There was still a chance to make one more picture if she had missed anything. Gott in Himmel! The cause of Charlotta's surprise was a large eruption of flame on the ground. It must have been quite significant to be visible at this altitude. What shocked the aviator was that whatever caused the eruption was clearly aimed at her. Through binoculars, she watched as a fiery ball with a black speck at its center moved ever closer to the stratosphere ship. It can only be a Congreve rocket, but who had ever heard of a rocket that could fly as high as an airship? That thought comforted Charlotta. The flame grew closer, the black point grew larger. Even so, Charlotta was not concerned. Soon, the rocket will burn all its propellant and fall to Earth. Charlotta considered herself a level-headed woman and certainly not given over to fear, but what happened next brought her to the brink of sanity. The flames at the base of the rocket petered out, as she expected, but then the lower half of the rocket dropped away. The top of the rocket, freed of all the dead weight, still had enough velocity to ascend. It did so for a few more seconds before another flame erupted from the bottom. This smaller, lighter rocket proceeded upward for a short while before exploding into a fiery orange cloud. Even in the thin air, the sound was deafening. Soon the orange cloud disintegrated into a tenebrous wisp of smoke. Charlotta remembered to breathe and congratulated herself on surviving. That was premature. A tinkling sound reverberated through the craft. No doubt, parts of the rocket hid in the fuselage. Charlotta was alarmed, but just for a moment. There was no hissing that would indicate the fuselage was punctured. Her moment of relief was transient. The needle on the balloon's pressure gauge started to swing back and forth wildly. It took no savant to draw the horrible conclusion. The gas bag was holed. The spy craft had been mortally wounded. Charlotta knew she had no choice but to accept the fact that her spy craft was doomed. But there are degrees of doom. The glider's wings, ailerons, and engine answered her commands. If I can get to the sea! If she could not save the craft, at least she could hide it. The Americans could not be allowed to find the spy ship. I will steer the craft into the ocean where it will be hidden forever. The Germanic aviatrix steered, bullied, and cajoled the spy craft to its final destination with that grim, singular thought. Winfield cabled Sarah from Providence with the bad news. Her husband had been unavoidably delayed and would not join his young wife in Innsmouth. As usual, he blamed the absence on the demands of his business. Sarah knew better. Winfield would rather spend time with his fancy woman in Providence than travel to Innsmouth to spend time with his pregnant wife. So be it, Sarah said to nobody in particular. She was prone to speaking out loud to herself. Lonely women sometimes do. Sarah and Winfield had planned to stroll along the beach at sunset. searching for sand dollars. When she'd first started walking out with Winfield, the young pair strolled along the coast at every opportunity. A younger, better Winfield had proposed to her on that very beach. Sarah decided she didn't need the man anyway. If Winfield can't find the time or desire to attend his pregnant wife, well, that's his bad luck. She traced the rugged shoreline that Innsmouth was renowned for at a brisk pace. Crashing waves and the shrieks of seabirds lulled her into a relaxing blankness. Salty sea air does wonders for a person's constitution. And the quality of the light at sunset is incomparable. Sarah soon forgot her husband. Her pleasant reverie was rudely interrupted when she stood in a pool of some loathsome gelatinous muck. It could only have been the remains of some sea creature. The poor thing was cast out of the ocean and placed directly in the path of a sad and distracted woman. Slime stuck to the bottom of Sarah's boot. She balanced on one foot and kicked and waved the other foot in the air to dislodge the muck from her boot. She looked like a woman possessed. Distracted and entirely preoccupied by this unwelcome turn of events, Sarah did not even look up as the fuselage of the stratosphere ship sailed silently over her head and finished its long glide into the waves. Only the splash caused by the impact caused Sarah to look out to the sea. A stratosphere ship is entirely out of its element on the water. As soon as it landed on the waves, the craft started sinking. The rear of the craft, where the engines were, was heaviest. It sank first. That caused the front to rise up out of the sea. For a moment, it was as if a totem pole had sprung from the water. Sarah was speechless at the spectacle. Light from the setting sun bounced off the glassy protuberances in the fuselage. The unnatural iridescence caught Sarah's eye and mesmerized the woman. As the machine sank, the pressure inside the fuselage built up until the air trapped inside had no place to go. Finally, the compressed air exploded out of a camera window and escaped the doomed craft. The air was filled with an unearthly shriek. Inch by inch, the craft was sucked down into the sea. Seawater boiled and churned, adding to the din. The bat-like wings at the front of the craft were the last thing to be covered by water. When they disappeared, the silence returned. Sarah did nothing to break the stillness. She simply watched the flock of seagulls whirl and spin over the water where the craft had been. Only when the hideous rubbery creature emerged from the sea did Sarah find the energy or will to break the silence. She screamed, and then nothing. Olmsted said nothing while Zadok Allen sat across from him and perused the contents of the manila folder. Once Olmsted lit up a cigarette and enjoyed a couple of puffs. He loved to let the smoke drift out of his mouth and then breathe it in through his nose. The temporary office they shared was only a shack on the far side of Camp Arkham. It was cold and draughty, and the cigarette helped Olmsted ignore their discomfort. Other than smoke, he did nothing to disturb his friend's concentration. Olmsted had read the folder only the day before, and he had only just come to terms with it himself. Finally, Zadok looked up. A diving suit? Really? Yes, Alan, unbelievable but true. After scaring the witness half to death, leaving her unconscious on the beach, our German friend set the suit on fire and buried the remains. Luckily, one of our tracker dogs unearthed it. Enough was left to determine that the diving suit was of French origin. Zadok interrupted. They make the best ones. Olmsted could only sigh in agreement. Of course they do. Our working theory is that the German expected to ditch the glider at sea. He would have been picked up by a submersible, but your rocket changed all that. The little surprise ruined his plan. We think the glider did land in the water, but far from the planned rendezvous point. Our German friend had no option but to swim ashore. As luck would have it, he almost bumped into the only person to witness the crash. Zadok scratched his face. I'm a little perplexed by one thing. Why did the German not get rid of the witness? You're right about that, Alan. It is a bit of a head-scratcher. Maybe he panicked, might even have taken pity on the woman, or was just in a hurry. Olmsted rubbed his hands together, stood and walked over to the pot-belly stove that struggled to keep the hut warm. He took a couple of tin mugs from a shelf and poured some coffee into them. Without another word, he opened a drawer and withdrew a small bottle of whiskey. Want me to Irish yours up as well? Zadok said nothing, which Olmsted interpreted as a yes. The men took a few sips of the heavily augmented beverage before continuing. It was Zadok who broke the silence. "Where's the German now?" "Could be anywhere by now, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's still in Innsmouth. The place is a maze of rat holes and the inhabitants don't seem especially eager to help the authorities. They are a very standoffish sort. We have some Marines poking around and looking, but 5 will get you 10 and they'll come up empty." Zadok took a long sip of the coffee. "And the woman?" Olmsted shook his head and shrugged. "I'm open to suggestions. I don't suppose we could bring her in, give it a 3rd degree, or even the 4th degree." "Don't think I didn't consider that, Alan, old man, but she is to be treated with kid gloves. I have been told so in no uncertain terms. Whipple Van Buren Phillips, her father, is a big wheel in these parts. Very big. In fact, his company is a major contractor on the project." Olmsted poured back the rest of his coffee and lit up another smoke. "You're a married man, Alan. Why don't you give the lady a visit? I'm sure you know what to say. I'm told you can be quite persuasive." "That's not a suggestion, is it?" "No, Alan, it is not." It was uncomfortably hot in the Phillips parlor. There was a new model steam radiator in the house, and it was worth every cent if you liked cracked lips and perspiring. Zadok Allen tugged at his collar and tried not to squirm. He didn't have much success. Private Obed Marsh, on the other hand, seemed unaffected by the heat. Obed said. "This is a fine cup of coffee, ma'am. Thank you." The private held up the cup to examine its base. Fine china, too. Wedgwood, it looks to me. Obed was a picture-perfect soldier. He'd always been a soldier, man and boy. He was trim, especially for a man his age, clean-shaven, well-dressed, and still had the iron in his back. Obed didn't sweat or fidget. In his immaculate black uniform, he was a credit to the Corps of Savants. Zadok could smell the soap and polished leather from across the room. But none of that matters in the Phillips household. Zadok would have bet a month's pay that Obed was the first black man to ever sit in the Phillips drawing room. At least the lady of the house pretended to maintain an air of civility. "Yes, Private, it is Wedgwood. You have quite an eye." She might as well have said, "Keep it, Private, it's yours." Zadok knew that Obed's cup and saucer would never be used again. Zadok and Obed had been sent to the Phillips house to appease the wealthy and influential Whipple Van Phillips Buren, and more importantly to reassure the lady of the house that she had not witnessed a communard spy walking out of the waves. The last thing the organizers of the project needed were more rumors. There are quite enough of those already. Zadok was surprised at how easy it had all been. He had agonized for days devising a story to convince Whipple's daughter that what she saw was not actually what she saw. He need not have worried, because the woman readily accepted Zadok's explanation. Too readily, I think. Perhaps she finds comfort in the lie. The truth is more upsetting. Sarah finished her coffee and put down a cup of saucer. She shifted in her chair to better address Zadok and better to ignore Obed. "I can't tell you how relieved I am by your visit, Captain Allen. My mind has been racing ever since I saw that salvager, an illegal salvager." Zadok finished the sentence for the woman. He was a father to 3 children and knew the value of repetition. You stumbled upon him searching for shipwrecks, probably for South Seas gold. The strange thing is, as Zadok thought, that the bit about the gold is genuine. Zadok had grown up near Massachusetts, and he'd often heard stories about strange pieces of gold washing ashore near Innsmouth. Zadok had not actually met anyone who'd found the gold themselves, or seen a piece of gold. All the same, they said they knew someone who'd struck it rich. The local legend was perfect for Zadok's plan. Lies are always more effective when they are wrapped in the truth. These unlicensed salvagers are not much better than pirates, really. They use diving suits to explore the shipwrecks. As you know, there are dozens of them up and down the coast. When they find something, you can be sure that it is not reported to the proper authorities. "But Captain, what was it I saw on the surface? It looked, well, like a submersible." "Oh, it was probably just a piece of wreckage they dislodged from a ship. Sometimes bits and pieces float to the surface again. Salvagers fill a piece of wreckage with balloons. They inflate the balloons to lift the items to the surface. But often as not, the wreckage just sinks again. The shriek you reported was probably a salvage balloon leaking. It's dangerous and risky, salvaging is. I'm sure that is what you witnessed. You just had the bad luck to run into the treasure hunter when he came up for air. The woman giggled, not quite a ladylike laugh, not a cackle either. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I was certain I had counted some type of sea creature. It had a flat nose, squamous grey skin, and those eyes, those bulbous glassy eyes. She stopped speaking and stared off into space. What you are describing, madam, is a diver suit, nothing more. You saw a man who didn't want to be seen. I expect he was as surprised by you as you were by him. Sarah forced a tight-lipped smile. I don't suppose he fainted as well. He didn't have your refined sensibilities. After all, he left you on the beach, didn't he? Not the actions of a gentleman, was it? Do you think you'll be able to apprehend him, Captain? Well, madam, if we don't, it won't be for lack of effort, but I would be lying to you if I did not say our chances grow slimmer with each passing day. He probably returned to Innsmouth and has gone to ground. Yes, Innsmouth. I don't want to tell you your business, Captain, but you might want to concentrate your efforts in the Portuguese part of town. I'm sure you will find your man there. The woman's eyes darted towards Obed. She pushed her hands together and forced him down into her lap. Captain, could I impose upon you? Obed interrupted with a little cough. Perhaps I should go and fire up the steamer, Captain. Good thinking, Private. I will join you presently. When Obed left, Sarah stood and went to the window. She paused there and watched Obed working on the steamer. After a moment she spoke. I'm so happy you came, Captain Allen. You have done me a great service by setting my mind at ease. She turned to face Zadok. Her previous agitation left her. You are a savant. Have you heard of maternal impression, Captain? Shocks experienced by a mother are believed to cause problems for an unborn child. Mental disorders in the child, such as schizophrenia and melancholy, mirror similar disordered feelings in the mother. Maternal shocks can even manifest themselves through a child's physical appearance. Madam, I'll be blunt. I know you have been through quite a shock, but I assure you there is no such thing. You worry for nothing. No, it's true. That poor man in England, they say his mother was frightened by an elephant when she was with child. What if that encounter with a sea creature caused my child to look, well, fish-like? Ever since that day I've been consumed with that thought. Bit by bit, day by day, my child would become a monster. Zadok held up 2 fingers. I wouldn't worry, madam, on 2 accounts. Firstly, you didn't see a sea creature. It was a man. A reprobate, it is true, but just a man. Secondly, I have good reason for rejecting your theory. If, as you say, maternal impression exists, my children would be monsters. I can honestly tell you they are not. They're my angels. My wife has a taste for somewhat macabre literature. She can't get enough of it, especially when she was with child. She stayed in bed for hours reading Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Shelley, Polidori, and God alone knows what else. The woman smiled. You have children, Captain? Yes, I have 3 girls, Rebecca, Leah, and Ruth. All happy, all well made. My wife reads them Gothic fairy tales quite often. I'm afraid to say that children enjoy the unsavory aspects perhaps little more than they should. Children, after all, are exhilarated by the unknown. They enjoy being scared. A little. Besides, I feel scary stories impart a healthy dose of caution to the little ones. We all need that these days. One day what happened to you will make a good story for you to tell your child. Nothing more. Rebecca, Leah, and Ruth. You are of the Hebrew faith, Captain? I am. Oh. She straightened in her seat, and the smile on her face was perceptibly more forced. Zadok knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that his cup and saucer would also never be used in the Phillips household ever again. I can't say I'm surprised. Even so, he felt sorry for the woman. She was a pitiable creature. I'm sure your baby will grow up to be a healthy, happy adult. Have you picked out a name yet? Of course, Captain, 2 of them. Mildred if it's a girl. And with somewhat less enthusiasm, she said, I suppose if it's a boy, I will have to name him after his grandfather's. They will provide for his upbringing after all, so if it is a boy, I will call him Howard Phillips. Well, I'm sure that under your care and example, little Howard Phillips Lovecraft will grow up to be a perfectly healthy, well-adjusted gentleman. Zadok stood to leave. After all, Mrs. Lovecraft, as it says in the book of Proverbs, do not forsake your mother's teaching. The fog was both a curse and a blessing in one. Charlotta was chilled to the core, but the clinging vapor provided concealment. Now that she had rowed the boat to the buoy, there was nothing to do but wait. The lack of exercise meant her body was slowly chilled to the bone. When Charlotta lost faith and decided she had been forgotten, the French ship finally arrived. The Chthonic surfaced not 100 meters from the buoy. A sickly green light from the buoy lamp reflected off of the submersible. Her cold and fear were forgotten. Charlotta rowed towards the submersible with all haste. A crewman helped Charlotta out of the stolen dinghy and carried the precious crate of photographic plates into the ship. She followed him, and soon the submersible and Charlotta safely returned to the deep.